Have you ever used weighted props in your yin yoga practice? Some people try and get that effect with a heavy blanket or a bolster or even a block, a cork block maybe, in certain postures. But what is really amazing to use is a sandbag. Now, not everybody has used this before, and there's a couple of things that need to be mentioned if you are going to use these, but essentially, by adding some weight on the body in a particular posture, you might be able to, one, relieve a little bit of effort that you're using with holding something in place with your limbs, but also get a little bit more sensation. And the third thing is that it can actually be quite a comforting thing to feel a sense of weight on the body. So that's three things. Before I go ahead and show you some of the postures in yin yoga that do really well with sandbags added, I'd like to just make a couple of little disclaimers. One, it's much, much easier if somebody else is putting the sandbag on top of you. I don't have that today. I'm going to be demonstrating with myself. And two, if you are a teacher wanting to bring these into your classes, it's very important that you first know that someone's not experiencing compression before you then put a bolster on top of them. Because if they've got a bit of painful compression, it's the same as coming over and giving them adjustment where you're pushing further. You might actually be creating a bit of pain. So I'm going to talk through some places where that may come up in the next little bit. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and show you some postures and how you can add a sandbag to those postures in yin yoga. The first is that you can add a sandbag to any of the forward folds. Now, of course, you always want to get consent from somebody before you put this sandbag on them. But if they do consent, you could do this in butterfly, caterpillar, half caterpillar, and half frog. The upper back is essentially doing the same thing. So what we would do is take the sandbag, and once people are settled, we would take that sandbag, and you can either go across the shoulders or long ways between the shoulders and just add a little bit of the weight there. Now, ideally, if you're a teacher, it's a great idea for you to be there when the student's coming out of the shape so that you can help them safely remove it, especially if it is a bit heavy. If not, a nice way to help the students get out on their own is to slowly roll up and have their hands behind their lower back so that as the sandbag falls, they can just catch it and guide it to the floor. I'd say these two sandbags that I'm working with here are probably a kilo in weight because I like a little extra sensation. So that's a way that you can do it for the forward folds. Another that's quite great and definitely warrants some help is coming into our Sphinx position. So in Sphinx position, in our back bend, sometimes a little bit of weight across the sacrum and the buttocks can actually feel really nice, like an anchor point. Now, sometimes the sandbags will kind of sink to one side, so it's nice to have that even. Sometimes you can even lay two sandbags or stack two sandbags. This can also be quite nice if somebody finds that they naturally fold quite deeply, especially around that L5-S1 junction, because it will just provide a little bit of anchorage in the opposite direction. And it's not too difficult for a student to roll and simply let the sandbag fall off them. So that's a nice way that you can add a sandbag to your Sphinx position. And then we've got our floor-based twists. So if I was to come down onto the floor, you can do this with one or two sandbags. Any of the twists, let's just say nice and easy. I'm going to take my left leg across. Now, this is one of those moments. If you had a student or if you had the experience where right on the inside of your hip, if your leg starts to push in toward your hip socket and it feels like it stops or gets stuck. And the thought of someone pushing your leg down would make you grip and tense because you're already getting a pinch there. Adding a sandbag on top is probably not going to be a great idea. So if you're a teacher, best to just check that someone's not experiencing compression here first. And if it's all good and you're good to go, you can either just lay that sandbag on top of their thigh. You could go closer to the knee or closer to the hip. Depending on the fabric of pants, sometimes they can slide off. And I can feel that really encouraging the rotation in my spine, which feels lovely. And then if you wanted to, you could add a second sandbag to the left shoulder. There's something about the weight of the two sandbags here that can actually be very soothing. And this is a nice one where students can simply just encourage the sandbags to roll off as they come and find their rebound. And then the last one that I will share with you is adding a sandbag in our child's pose. Again, a little tricky to do for yourself, but I'm going to give it a go. Coming into our child's pose. What can be really nice, maybe even this is how you finish your class. It might be more of a supported child's pose where there's a bolster out in front, the little, what I call Anne Geddes, who was a famous photographer who took pictures of babies sleeping on pumpkins. Maybe you can picture it, maybe you can't. I don't have a bolster right here, so I'm just going to bring my legs together a little bit more. And I'm going to bring this sandbag up quite similar to Sphinx and just have that resting there on my lower back. And I'm going to stack my two fists together and let my head rest on that stack. This is really nice, especially for people who do enjoy the feeling of the teacher putting a little bit of a press onto the back of their sacrum in child's pose. And again, quite easy to help guide that prop off the body. Now, you might not have a canvas bag that you can fill up with sand, but you might have a bag of flour or some other way that you could substitute for a sandbag, especially if you're doing a home practice these days with your yin yoga. Very helpful, just a lovely extra additive to your practice. And I hope that you find those options useful.